जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस ऐसे भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की नमाचार्य हरिदास ठाकुर की प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासति गौर भक्त वृंद की श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की वृंदावन मथुरा धाम की नवदीप मायापुर धाम की जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की गंगा माई यमुना माई की भक्ति देवी तुलसी महारानी की समवेत भक्त वृंद की गौर प्रेमानंदे all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयम् उदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके Bhaktir-bhavati naistiki. So today we are reading from the third canto, chapter number 21, verse number 4. Tasyam savai mahayogi yuktayam yoga lakshanaihi Sasarja katida viryam tanme sushrushave vada tasyam savai mahayogi yuktayam yoga lakshinaihi sasarja katida viryam tanme sushrushave vada tasyam savai mahayogi yuktayam yoga lakshanaihi sasarja katida viryam tanme sushrushave vade. Tasyam savai mahayogi yuktayam yoga lakshana tanme sushrushave vada Tasyam savai mahayogi Tayam yoga lakshina Satchakatida viryam Tanme sushrushave vada Tasyam savai mahayogi Tayam yoga lakshina Sasarja katida viryam tanme sushrushave vadam. Katida Tanme Susrushave Vada Tasyam Savai Mahayogi Yuktayam Yoga Lakshinaihi Sasarja Katida Viryam Tanme Susrushave Vada. Matajis. Tasyam Savai Mahayogi Yuktayam Yoga Lakshinaihi Sarja Katida Viryam Tanme Susrushave Vada. Tasyam Savai Mahayogi Tayam Yoga Lakshinahi Tasya Viryam Tanme Susrushave Vada. Samsavai Mahayogi Yuktayam Yoga Lakshinaihi Sasarja Katida Viryam Tanme Susrushave Vada. Tasyam, in her, Saha Kardama Muni. Why? In fact, Mahayogi, great mystic yogi. Yuktayam, endowed. Yoga Lakshinaihi, with the eightfold symptoms of yogic perfection. Sasarja, propagated. Katida, how many times? Viryam, offspring. Tat, that narration. Me, to me. Susrushave, who I am eager to hear. Vada, tell. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation: how many offspring did that great yogi beget through the princess, who was endowed with eightfold perfection in the yoga principles? Oh, pray tell me this, for I am eager to hear it. Purport: here Vidura inquired about Kardama Muni and his wife Devahuti and about their children. It is described here that Devahuti was very much advanced in the performance of eightfold yoga. The 8 divisions of yoga performance are described as control of the senses, strict following of rules and regulations, practice of different sitting postures, control of breath, withdrawing the senses from sense objects, concentration of mind, meditation, and self-realization. After self-realization, there are 8 further perfectional stages which are called Yoga Siddhis. The husband and wife, Kardama and Devahuti, were advanced in yoga practice. The husband was a Mahayogi, great mystic, and the wife was a Yoga Lakshane, or one advanced in yoga. They united and produced children. Formerly, after making their lives perfect, great sages and saintly person used to beget children. Otherwise, they strictly observed the rules and regulations of celibacy, brahmacharya, following the rules and regulations of celibacy. It is required for perfection of self-realization and mystic power. There is no recommendation in the Vedic scriptures that one can go on enjoying material sense gratification at one's whims as one likes, and at the same time become a great meditator by paying a rascal some money. Thus ends the purport. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunhitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Krupa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So whenever I'm asked to give the Bhagavatam class, I remember of my college days, because I was working as a research assistant, and every month my professor used to ask and present the things what we have found in that month. So I used to put together a presentation of of all my research findings and I used to present it to my professor. So similarly, whenever Achita Prabhu asked me to give a class, it's like now it's like getting a message from a professor that I have to put together all my research findings in a presentation and then show it. Anyway, that's how I'm kind of conditioned, that's how I was trained. So that's why I always make these presentations, that's how, because I was trained in my college to put together. So, but anyway, so I hope that this is useful, these PowerPoint slides, to make it more clear. And if you have any feedback, please let me know. I mean, of course, one usual feedback I always get is that just speak slowly, right? It looks like I tend to speak too fast. But that is something which is a work in progress for me. So I hope that at least this class I kind of go slow. Right. Okay. So beginning with the summary. In the previous chapters we have seen how Lord Varaha saved this planet Earth from the from the Hiranyaksha, from the demon Hiranyaksha, and then the Earth was re-established in its original orbital position. And after that, Brahma, there is a description how Brahma has continued his creation. And also that is in the previous chapter, 20th chapter. Of course, in between the verses where it describes the Brahma's creation, there was also a brief description about the Mahat Tattva, how the Mahat Tattva was agitated and how the three modes are disturbed, which kind of unfolds the creation. And also there is also a description about how the Lord as a Paramatma is inspiring and giving the knowledge to Brahma in the process of creation. So in this way, even though apparently it looks like Brahma is creating, but it's not really the Brahma, it's actually the Lord who is instrumental in creation. And that's what I have explained in my previous class, the material cause and efficient cause. Material cause means who is providing the raw materials, right? So who is providing? It's not the Brahma is creating his raw materials, it is a Mahat Tattva. So after the Mahat Tattva is agitated, the raw materials are already there for Brahma to use and create. So that is why the material cause is the Purusha, the Lord. At the same time, the efficient cause means who is providing the knowledge, right? So in this case, the Lord himself as Paramatma is providing the knowledge to Brahma. So in this way, Brahma is continuing his creation, and in the previous chapter there has been a lot of description of how Brahma created different living entities. And interestingly, if you see in the previous chapter, when Brahma has started creation, he starts by creating ignorance, the 5 types of ignorance. So that is something which is interesting. I mean, why would you start with ignorance, right? Suppose when you want to do something, you start with something nice, right? But Brahma, actually he starts by creating 5 types of ignorance, Tamisra, Andha-Tamisra and all those things. So one may be wondering, why is Brahma started creation with ignorance? Well, the reason is, that kind of aligns with what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita also, Dukkhalayam Ashashvatam, correct? So this material world is Dukkhalayam. This is a place of suffering and ignorance, and this is a place for the conditioned souls. So that means that these living entities are bound by ignorance. That's why Brahma first starts by creating ignorance, so that these living entities are kind of bound in this material universe. That is why you see the first creation, it's all demons, like different types of demons, because he started by creating ignorance. And then later on we can see the other living entities like Manus, Prajapatis, so on, like divine living entities are also created along with these demonic living entities. So especially in the current verse, Vidura is kind of further inquiring especially about the Manu, Vaivashvata Manu, and about his progeny, about his lineage. Yeah, Swayambhu Manu. Yeah, I'm sorry. About the Swayambhu Manu. So, okay, as we all know that in one day of Brahma, there are 1,000 cycles of Yuga, and there are 14 Manus, which appears in every day of Brahma. And especially this, we are currently, as you can see, the 14 Manus on this chart, and currently we are under the 7th Manu, which is Vaivashvata Manu, correct, and whose father is Vivaswan. And every period of Manu has an avatar of the Lord, and the current avatar of the Lord is Vamana, and the Indra is Purandara. He is the Indra. The Bali is going to be the next Indra when the next Manu starts. The next Manu is Sarvani Manu. Anyway, so this Manu is actually a very important personality. His name is also mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita also. In the 4th chapter, Krishna says to Arjuna that I have instructed this divine knowledge to Vivaswan, and the father Vivaswan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and the Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku. But however, in due course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science appears to be lost. And that's all. That's only one shloka which Krishna talks about Manu, but we don't really have much information about Manu, like who instructed Manu, like which form of Krishna and all those things. We don't have much information. All the information we have is the Bhagavad Gita, which is taught to Arjuna. But however, now that we are discussing about Manu, probably some of those things could be reflected in the activities and the behavior of Manu, because remember, Manu is someone whom Krishna has personally given this knowledge to, even before he gave it to Arjuna. And when Krishna says that this knowledge is lost, when I was reading this verse in the Bhagavad Gita, I was kind of wondering, like, what exactly is lost, right? I mean, when you say lost, is it like some portion of a book is lost, or what exactly is lost, or some interpretation is lost? So for that, let's try to understand what this word yoga, that's what is meant, right? Yoga Brashta means what exactly is this yoga which Krishna is referring to, and what exactly the thing which is kind of lost. So if you see yoga, during the time of Arjuna, if you try, let's say for example, in current modern day, if you say yoga, I mean, how do people understand when you say word yoga? It's just meditation or doing some yoga practices, correct? So similarly, if we try to understand how Arjuna, during the time of Arjuna, how this word yoga was understood, I would recommend you to read the Moksha Kanda of Mahabharata. Moksha Kanda is where Bhishma Dev was lying on the bed of arrows, and then he was speaking, and a lot of yoga principles were taught in that section of Mahabharata. That's a Moksha Kanda. And if you read that Moksha Kanda section of the Mahabharata, it's mostly like like a dhyana yoga style of yoga. It's like cessation of activities, like you stop your activities, and it's primarily of like Patanjali style of yoga, going to a forest, sitting on a bank of a river, and giving up all the material activities and renouncing all the material objects. So that is how yoga was understood. That is why if you see in the Bhagavad Gita also, when Krishna was talking about yoga, Arjuna asked twice or thrice that which is better, is it meditation is better or action is better, because it is kind of confusing to Arjuna also, that why, I mean, because that is kind of contradictory to the understanding of yoga of during that his time. But on the other hand, if you see the yoga which Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita, it is kind of more action oriented. Right? Krishna wants Arjuna to act, he wants to fight. That is kind of opposite to what Arjuna understood as yoga. And what Krishna says is that primarily it's kind of an action oriented yoga, and which involves controlling the senses and renouncing the result and performing in, with devotion. That's how kind of Krishna presents the yoga in Bhagavad Gita. So that is what is lost. When Krishna says it is lost, this kind of yoga where it's more of an action oriented, that is kind of not there. That is why even Arjuna didn't know what Krishna was referring to. So what I would like to do is that, when you say yoga, it's primarily three things. You have karma yoga, and you have jnana yoga, and you have dhyana yoga. So those are the three things. So now I'll just try to give a small comparison of how this was understood during that time, and how Krishna presented in Bhagavad Gita, which is kind of different from what Arjuna's understanding is, because that kind of ties back to Manu, because we are kind of discussing about Manu, and that kind of reflects back into how Manu is performing his duties and his behavior, and how he's practicing yoga. So let's start with the first one, the karma. So karma, karma means it's understood like karma mimamsa, like the Jaimini's principle of karma mimamsa. And in the Jaimini's karma mimamsa, he says, karmana jayate jantur, karmaneva paraliyate, sukham dukkham bhayam kshemam, karmanaiva bhipadyate. Actually, Krishna talks this karma mimamsa philosophy to Nanda Maharaj, when Krishna does discouraging Nanda Maharaj to worship Indra and instead worship Govardhan. Actually, Krishna quotes this shloka of karma mimamsa. This is kind of atheistic in nature, but that's how karma was understood in those days. So the meaning of the shloka is that it is by the force of karma that living entities takes birth, and it is by karma alone he meets his destruction. His happiness, distress, fear, and sense of security all arise as effects of karma. So essentially what he's trying to say is that it is kind of emphasizing more on the karma, that people say, right, you are the master of your own destiny. You do good things, you'll get good things. You do bad things, you get bad things. So ultimately you are in control of your destiny. That also means that you don't need to worship God. You just do your prescribed duties, do your varnashrama duties, do your Vedic rituals, do your homas, and you're good. And karma is ultimate thing. That is what karma mimamsa is talking about. But the same thing when Krishna talks about karma yoga, the way Krishna defines karma yoga in Bhagavad Gita is that yagnartat karmono nyatrat lokoyam karma bandhana tadardam karma kaunteya mukta sangha samachara. What Krishna says is that karma or the work should be done as a sacrifice to Vishnu. Otherwise, the same work will cause bondage in this material world. O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, and in this way you will always remain free from the bondage. So if you compare to these two things here, Krishna is not denying the karma aspect. He's acknowledging it, but at the same time, he's telling that when you want to call something as a karma yoga, then that has to be performed as a sacrifice to Vishnu, to please Lord Vishnu. Only then that karma will become a karma yoga, otherwise it is just a mundane karma. And also Krishna further says that, the shloka yat karoshi yad yasnasi, basically where he says that whatever you do, whatever you offer, just give it as an offering unto me. So in this way, basically Krishna, kind of brings in the Bhagavan aspect, right, the God aspect into it. Otherwise, if you see the karma mimamsa, there is no really God. It's just karma. You and karma, you just do your duties and then you are good. So this is how the karma is defined in the Bhagavad Gita. So the same thing with the jnana. When you say jnana, essentially, if you read the Upanishads and if you read the other Puranas, essentially jnana is essentially referring to the knowledge of the impersonal Brahman, right? Knowledge of the Brahman. When how come you become self-realized? You become self-realized when you know the Brahma, know the science of Brahman, correct? That is how it's understood. Jnana Yoga means the knowledge of Brahman. And that is why there are so many statements from the Upanishads where it says, Aham Brahmasmi, Tattvamasi, Sarvam Kalamidam Brahman, Soham. Correct? So this means that I am Brahman, that you are, all of this is Brahman, that I am that. So this is all kind of impersonal knowledge. That is how the Jnana is kind of technically understood. The knowledge of the Brahman is called as Jnana Yoga. But the way Krishna defines the Jnana Yoga in the Bhagavad Gita is that he acknowledges these things, but at the same time he adds one more layer onto it. He says that Brahmano hi pratishtanam. Basically he says that yes, the Brahman is there, but know that I am the basis of that Brahman. It's not the Brahman is independent, that I am the basis of that Brahman too. Correct? So, and that is why, interestingly, if you see, I mean, essentially what Krishna is trying to do here is that he's trying to bring the Bhagavan aspect, the devotion aspect into everything. He's trying to bring the devotion aspect into karma. He's also trying to bring the devotion aspect into Jnana Yoga also, by defining that, he is the basis of the Brahman also. So, of course, sometimes some people criticize that, why is Prabhupada talking about bhakti in karma yoga, or why is Prabhupada talking about bhakti in Jnana Yoga, right? So, but that is how Krishna actually defines karma and jnana, because there is an infusion of bhakti in every aspect of yoga. And actually the bhakti, the devotion, is actually the reason of success for any yogi. Right? For example, let me tell you, even for a Mayavadi, the reason for the perfection of a Mayavadi's perfection on the jnana is because of devotion. Correct? Because he may not be devoted to Krishna, but he is devoted to his Guru. Right? That is why it says, Yasya deve para bhakti, yata deve tata guru. Means devotion and faith in the Guru. Just like even the Shankaracharya's disciples, they may not have devotion onto Bhagavan, but can you say that they don't have devotion onto their Guru? No. Right? I mean, the disciples, they pleased Shankaracharya, and they have a devotion and they served his Guru. So that is actually that is why they became perfect. The same in the karma yoga also. Like so many materialistic people, they are working outside. They are also having devotion. In my previous company when I was working, my boss said one thing which is very interesting. He said that for us, client is the God. Treat client as a God. You see, whatever client asks, you do it. I don't care whether you stay late in the office or not, but you have to please the client because he is our God. He is giving us money. See, devotion, right? If you want to become successful even materially, you should have devotion. You have to be devoted to your work. You have to be devoted to your, client, right? That's how you become successful, even in the karma yogi also. So there is devotion everywhere, whether you deny it or not, whether you agree it or not, devotion is everywhere. Even a Mayavada has a devotion in him. He has a devotion to his Guru. Now let's look into the third one, which is Ashtanga Yoga. Again, Ashtanga Yoga means, technically it's like the Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga is considered as a yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, the eightfold mystic yoga, correct? And if you see the Yoga Sutras, it starts by saying, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Means, this is how Patanjali defines yoga. He says yoga means Chitta Vritti Nirodha, means stilling of the changing states of mind. And what will happen when you do that Ashtanga Yoga? Tada drashtu swarupena avasthanam. When that is accomplished, the seer abides in his own true nature. So this is how the Ashtanga is defined. It's the same thing. I mean, even in the Bhagavad Gita also, Krishna doesn't deny this form of Dhyana Yoga. I mean, he acknowledges it, he discusses it. At the same time, he says in practical, that's all right, but at least he acknowledges it. But at the same time, he also, even in the Ashtanga Yoga also, he kind of infuses the bhakti into the Ashtanga Yoga also. If you see this, the 29th verse, he says, Sarva Bhutasthanam Atmanam, means a true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. You see? This is how, Krishna brings in the Bhagavan aspect even into the Ashtanga Yoga also. Even though Patanjali doesn't really talk about Bhagavan, I mean, even though he talks about Bhagavan, but he just gives it as an option. It's not mandatory. But the way Krishna talks in Bhagavad Gita is that it kind of makes it must that you have to meditate on the Lord. It kind of makes it must that you have to have devotion unto everything, like in the jnana, karma also, everything. So that is what it is lost. When Krishna says that this yoga is lost, that is what he meant. That the action performed in devotion is lost. And one classical example, what I can think of, is the Sankhya philosophy. Like originally the Sankhya was a theistic philosophy. The way, Kapila describes, it's a theistic philosophy. Then how did the theistic philosophy end up in an atheistic philosophy? That's a classical example of yoga brashta. That the philosophy is there, but it just, you suck out Bhagavan from that. You just keep all the other things, but you just take out Bhagavan. And Krishna further continues in the 4th chapter. He says, being freed from attachment, fear and anger, and being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by the knowledge of me, and thus they all attained the transcendental love for me. So now let's see. If Krishna spoke to Bhagavad Gita to Manu, that means that this should even reflect in Manu's activities, correct? So if you see some of these verses which describes the Manu, actually I got confused. This is actually Swayambhu Manu. It's not about Vaivashvata Manu. So yeah, it's my mistake there. So if you see the Manu, the emperor Swayambhu Manu enjoyed life with his wife and subjects and fulfilled his desires without being disturbed by unwanted principles contrary to the process of religion. Celestial musicians and their wives sang in chorus about the pure reputation of the emperor, and in the early morning every day he used to listen to the pastimes of Supreme Personality of Godhead with a loving heart. Thus Swayambhuva Manu was a saintly king. Although absorbed in material happiness, he was not dragged to the lowest grade of life, for he always enjoyed his material happiness in a Krishna conscious atmosphere. So this kind of reflects the Manu, his activities and his consciousness. Even though he was performing so many activities, correct, at the same time he's having that devotion, and he's a devotee. Basically that's what he's trying to say here. And the same thing with the Kardama Muni also, correct? So even the Kardama Muni also, we can see that even though he's like an Ashtanga yogi practicing this eightfold path of mystic yoga, but if you really read about the Kardama Muni, basically he is also a devotee. There is also a devotion along with the Ashtanga yoga. There is also an infusion of devotion into his practice. That is why when Kardama Muni, when he realized the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you can see some of the statements made by Kardama Muni. Kardama Muni said, "O Supreme Worshipable Lord, my power of sight is now fulfilled, having attained the greatest perfection of the sight of you, who are reservoir of all existences." So in this way, we can also see many other also in the line of Manu, like for example Maharaj Ambarish, the lineage of Ikshvaku, which includes the Lord Ram. They're all devotees of the Lord. They're acting. It's not that they're trying to go away from the path of action. At the same time, they're also the devotees of the Lord. So that is what is important. That is what Krishna was trying to tell Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, that action is there, but just infuse it with bhakti. So that is why it is said that this jnana and karma are actually ineffective without bhakti. Because karma alone cannot liberate a person, or a jnana alone cannot liberate a person. Both karma and jnana requires bhakti for it to liberate a person. That is why in the Srimad Bhagavatam, when Narada Muni was talking to Vyasadeva, when Vyasadeva was kind of unhappy with his work, or he was kind of dejected of something lacking in him, then that is when Narada Muni says that Nishkarmyam api achyuta bhava varjitam na shobhate jnanam alam niranjanam. He says that the knowledge of self-realization, even though free from all material affinity, means actually he's trying to refer to the knowledge of Brahman here, does not look well if devoid of conception of God or bhakti. What then is the use of fruitive activities which are naturally painful from the beginning, and transient by nature if they do not utilize for the devotional service of the Lord. So in this way, even though when you have even the jnana and karma itself are kind of ineffective when it does not have bhakti. That is what Narada Muni even saying, including the knowledge of Brahman. Even the knowledge of Brahman, nishkarmya knowledge of Brahman is ineffective. So in this way, all are required, jnana, karma and ashtanga. Just take 2 more minutes and I will wrap it up. Okay, so this is, okay, so and we all know that the root problem is basically avidya, ignorance, and this slide gives you a comparison of how different acharyas have adopted to different processes in dealing with this issue. So we all know that the root problem is avidya and the solution is knowledge. But however, for an avidya, that means that for a person to acquire the knowledge, that means that first of all, you should have a regulated mind, correct? If without a regulated mind, how would you even study? So the solution is focus. But however, because of a sense, material desires, which, unregulated senses, it does not allow the mind to focus. So what is the solution? And regulated activities. So for this, if you see the Shankaracharya, what he would say is that, okay, the first thing is ignorance, knowledge. That means that you have to practice jnana yoga. But however, for you to practice jnana yoga, first of all, your mind should be regulated. For it to regulate, that means that you practice Ashtanga yoga. But however, even to practice Ashtanga yoga, first of all, your material desires has to come down, right? Otherwise, if you're having too much material desires, how are you going to practice it? Then he says that you practice karma yoga. So according to Shankaracharya, he puts this jnana yoga in the topmost ladder, that he says that jnana is ultimate. But if you look at the Ramanacharya, he says, no, it is not the jnana which is the ultimate, it is actually the bhakti yoga which is the ultimate. And the jnana is below that. But if you see Lord Chaitanya, he would say that, so in this way, if you see the previous acharyas, everybody acknowledges the karma yoga, jnana yoga and ashtanga yoga, and they said that these are all required. Nobody denied it. But for the first time, if you see Lord Chaitanya, he says that actually you don't need to practice karma yoga, jnana yoga, ashtanga yoga. Bhakti alone is sufficient. See, this is actually a very revolutionary thing. No acharya in the past has ever said that you don't need to practice karma yoga or jnana yoga or ashtanga yoga. They all said that you have to practice that based upon person. You recommend different things. It's all required. It's only Lord Chaitanya, he said that don't worry, just practice bhakti. Your ignorance will be destroyed, your mind will be regulated, and your senses will be controlled. So I was kind of wondering, like, wow, that's why, sometimes when I first came, a lot of devotees used to say, no, you don't need to practice that, you don't need to practice this. I was thinking but how do I control my body? How do I control my mind? Then how is the bhakti solution for everything? So it doesn't really make much sense to me. Can any one of you think of any example of any perfected devotee who was able to regulate his mind and senses and destroy his ignorance just by doing bhakti yoga? Can any one of you think? Yeah, exactly. Anyone else? Ambarish Maharaj. Yeah, that's actually a perfect example. If you see Prabhupada also, many times he quoted Ambarish Maharaj. So he is actually a classical example of how a person can control his mind, his senses, and destroy the avidya just by practicing the bhakti yoga. So, anyway, I'm running past the time. I have one more slide, but maybe I'll discuss in next class. Okay, I'll just end here. Yeah? Any questions, anyone? So, anyways, just to conclude, so this whole discussion about the Manu, why Vidura is asking about Manu, correct? So this is the discussion about the devotees of the Lord. This is, even though a Kardama Muni is an Ashtanga yogi, but still he is also a devotee of the Lord. That is why his description was there in the Bhagavatam also. And ultimately the perfection anybody can achieve is only through the Bhakti Yoga process. It is not through any other process. Even if you have any other process, for it to be succeed, it has to have a component or element of Bhakti. Nothing more than that. Yeah. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you.